Good afternoon, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. Thought I'd talk a little bit about negative interest rates. I heard the president say something about like how much he likes negative interest rates and thinks the Federal Reserve should take interest rates into negative territory, and the Federal Reserve has no interest in taking interest rates into negative territory. And my question to the president is like, how do you know you like these negative interest rates so much, considering that we have never experienced negative interest rates here in the United States? Now, I guess if you're heavily in debt or have a lot of real estate or invested in the stock market or something like that, then yeah, you could probably anticipate that negative interest rates are going to do really well for you, you know. But as far as the saver goes, you're going to get punished. Because it goes down something like this. The Federal Reserve, they don't buy anything. They lend money out there. And generally they buy government bonds, right? And when you buy a government bond, you are lending the government money, or mortgage-backed securities or anything else. That's lending money out into the system. But in turn, since they're a bank, they also have deposits, meaning that other banks deposit money with the Federal Reserve. That's them lending the Federal Reserve money. So generally how this works when you have an interest rate that's positive is that when you lend money out there, you get a return on that money. You get a little bit of interest rate from it. And so the Federal Reserve will pay a little bit of interest on these deposits that the big banks have with them. But when they take the interest rates negative, they start charging those banks to have a deposit with the Federal Reserve. And what is the big bank going to do? They're going to say like, well, we don't want to get charged a negative interest rate on our deposits. Give us that deposits and we'll loan it out to somebody who's going to give us an interest rate on it. So it gets loans out there into the system. But what happens with the banks when they get a bunch of deposits with them? Because when you loan money to the bank, that's basically putting money on deposit with the bank. They have to do something with that money. And if they have so many deposits that they have to deposit at the Federal Reserve and get charged a negative interest, then in turn, they're going to charge a negative interest rate on your deposit that you have put with them. And what are you going to do with your money if you get charged a negative interest rate? You're going to take the money out. And what do you do with it? You spend it. You buy stuff. But what if you say, hey, I'm just going to hold on to the cash? Well, how did the Federal Reserve get the interest rates to go negative in the first place? Because the idea is that the government wants to have negative yielding bonds where they can borrow money and get paid and pay back less than what they borrow. Now, who in their right mind is going to buy a negative yielding bond? I mean, are you going to go out there and buy a United States Treasury knowing that if you held on to it for duration, you would get paid back less than what you have borrowed or what you have lent out? That doesn't count. It's just counterintuitive. It doesn't make sense that you would do that. The only reason why somebody would buy a negative yielding bond is because they anticipate that interest rates are going to go deeper into negative territory and they'd be able to sell that bond for a profit. That's the only reason why somebody would buy a negative yielding bond. But if you're smart, you're like, I'm not going to buy a negative yielding bond. It just doesn't make any sense that I could pay back less than what I've lent out. So the only person out there who's going to be willing to buy a negative yielding bond is the Federal Reserve. And how do they do it? By devaluing the currency. And if they devalue the currency, everybody who's holding cash is going to lose out on their purchasing power of their cash, forcing them to spend their money. And if you don't want stuff, what do you do with it? Well, you want to invest it because you don't want to lose the purchasing power, so you want to make a return on your money. And where do you go with it? Real estate and stocks. So negative interest rates on bonds does awesome for the stock market and does awesome for real estate. And if the Federal Reserve is buying negative yielding bonds, the price of the bond goes up. As interest rates drop, prices rise. You see what's happening here? So no wonder why the president wants to see negative yielding interest rates, or negative interest rates in general. It's because, for one, it forces people to spend their money, causes the stock market to rise, causes real estate to rise, and it gives them the ability to borrow money and pay back less than what they have borrowed, if you're heavily in debt, like the United States is. But this is a terrible, terrible thing for the saver. So if you don't have a stock portfolio, if you don't have real estate, if you are not heavily in debt and you're trying to save up to do something grand with your money because you're just a regular old working class stiff who's trying to do something good with their life, you get screwed by these negative interest rates. I don't know. That's the way I kind of see things. Uneducated economist. You guys let me know.